Putin an open letter that doubled as a performance review. 26 years in power, and age, he noted, is beginning to show. Trump revealed he rejected a plan to send American troops into Iran to collect nuclear dust, then said he would be honored to meet the Ayatollah. Anthropic published a report arguing that the world should probably pause building the most powerful AI systems before they figure out how to improve themselves without human involvement. And an RV driver in Colorado turned a gas station's diesel tank into what can only be described as a community problem. I'm Lumina, your curator of chaos, and this is the Daily Dumpster Fire. Volodymyr Zelensky wrote Vladimir Putin a letter on Thursday. Not a diplomatic cable, not a readout of a back-channel conversation, not a carefully worded statement parsed by spokespeople for the benefit of journalists. A letter more than 1,800 words, addressed directly to the man who has spent the last 3 years trying to destroy his country, and made public before the Kremlin had finished deciding how to respond to it. The substance of the letter was a proposal, face-to-face negotiations in a neutral country, Switzerland, Turkey, or an Arab state under a full ceasefire for the duration of the talks. This is not a new offer. Zelensky has proposed direct talks with Putin before, and the answer has always been the same: meet in Moscow with preconditions that amount to surrender. What made this letter different was the tone. Zelensky acknowledged what everyone in Kiev already knows, that the United States is fully focused on the war with Iran, and that waiting for Washington to return its attention to Ukraine would be a mistake. He mocked Putin's 26-year grip on power, suggesting that age is beginning to take its toll. He referenced Ukraine's recent drone strike on the outskirts of St. Petersburg as paying a visit. Do not be afraid to take the path out of this war, Zelensky wrote. That is the main thing that is required of you now. Putin's response, delivered to foreign journalists in St. Petersburg before he had apparently read the letter, was to suggest that since Trump is busy with Iran, the European Union could talk Zelensky into surrendering territory, a position Ukraine has ruled out in terms that could not be clearer. Trump, for his part, said it would be great if the two leaders met, and that they should get it done. He declined to specify what concessions he had urged Putin to make, saying only that both sides would need to compromise, which is the diplomatic equivalent of saying the answer lies somewhere between conquest and annihilation. The letter is unlikely to produce a meeting, and the meeting, if it happens, is unlikely to produce a deal. But it served a purpose that has nothing to do with negotiations. It drew Putin into a public exchange on terrain Zelensky chose, in a format that made the Russian leader look reluctant to talk. In a war where the information front matters almost as much as the ground front, that is not nothing. Yesterday's episode described the exchange of fire between Iran and the United States, the missiles at Kuwait airport, the strikes on Keshem Island, the rapid unraveling of what everyone had politely been calling a ceasefire. Today, the context shifted from what happened to what almost happened. Speaking from the Oval Office on Thursday, President Trump, for the first time, detailed a plan he said he had opted not to approve, a ground operation that would have sent U.S. troops into Iran to collect enriched uranium, what he referred to as nuclear dust. The operation, Trump said, would have taken at least 2 weeks and required massive equipment to be airlifted in. He decided against it because of the risks. Whether the plan was ever operationally viable is not clear. Whether it was a serious proposal or the kind of hypothetical that gets floated in a briefing and then shelved is not clear either. What is clear is that Trump chose to talk about it publicly, in detail, on the same day that Iran was denying responsibility for the Kuwait airport strike, and the same week that ceasefire negotiations stalled. Trump also said the nuclear material is entombed, and that there is no reason to pursue the operation now. He suggested he was open to meeting Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Mujtaba Khamenei. I'd be honored to meet him, he said, and said that killing American troops would be a very good reason to restart military operations. The cumulative effect of these statements is disorienting. A president who is simultaneously at war with Iran, negotiating with Iran, and describing plans to infiltrate Iran. A ceasefire that is being violated by both sides while officials from both sides insist it is still in effect. A supreme leader whose status, alive, dead, engaging in talks, is the subject of competing claims that nobody can independently verify. Day 3, and the Gulf story has already passed the point where a coherent narrative is possible. What remains is a collection of statements, strikes, and denials that form less of a story and more of a noise floor. Anthropic, the AI company behind the Claude model family, published a report on Thursday that made an argument most of its competitors will not like and most governments will not act on. that the world should consider a coordinated, verifiable pause on building the most powerful AI systems. The reasoning is not especially comforting. Anthropic's internal data shows that AI is already accelerating the development of AI itself, creating a feedback loop that could lead to what researchers call recursive self-improvement, the point at which an AI system becomes capable of teaching itself to get smarter without meaningful human help. The company acknowledged that this threshold has not been reached, but added that it could arrive sooner than most institutions are ready for. The evidence suggests that the human role is narrowing at each step in the AI development process, the report said. The proposed solution, a global pause, faces obstacles that Anthropic itself outlined. It would require agreement between the United States and China, verification mechanisms that do not currently exist, and a level of coordination that the international community has not demonstrated on any issue, let alone one as commercially valuable and geopolitically strategic as AI. The company compared the challenge to nuclear arms control, but conceded that AI training is far easier to hide than a missile silo. The White House has acknowledged the capability of Anthropic's Mythos model, the one kept from public release due to its cybersecurity applications, but has pushed back on the company's framing, viewing the pause proposal as a strategy for slowing competitors under the cover of safety concerns. Trump, for his part, discussed AI safety cooperation with China during his recent visit to Beijing, and signed an executive order this week, requiring a 30-day preliminary review of the most powerful US AI models before release. The irony of an AI company asking the world to slow down so safety can catch up is that the request comes from the very industry driving the acceleration. It is a factory foreman suggesting the assembly line might be moving a little too fast. The line will not slow down. The market will not pause. The most that can be said is that someone with a front row seat to the problem has formally, publicly, and with impressive candor stated that there is a problem. And now, 3 stories from a world in which an RV driver turned a diesel tank into a biohazard. A man responded to weeks of doorbell pranks with a level of force that would be excessive in a war zone. And a school zone camera discovered that 6,000 drivers in Tampa either do not know what a school zone is or do not care. Story 1. A driver at a Maverick gas station in Montrose, Colorado, emptied an RV waste tank into the station's underground diesel supply. Not into the designated dump station, which by all accounts was clearly marked, but into the manhole cover leading directly to the diesel tank. The station had just received a fresh delivery of diesel. The driver's motive is unknown. The result is that the tank must be pumped out and thoroughly cleaned before any diesel can be sold. The station confirmed the pumps were shut down. A local RV enthusiast described the incident as almost unbelievable and helpfully explained the correct procedure for emptying an RV waste tank, which involves a valve, a hose, and a basic understanding of which hole is for sewage and which is for fuel. The distinction, it turns out, is not universal. Story 2. A man in what local reports describe as a Kentucky community, who had been subjected to repeated ding-dong-ditch pranks for weeks, made a decision that no reasonable person would endorse and no legal system would defend. He tackled children off their bicycles and dragged one of them into his home. The children, who had been ringing his doorbell and fleeing, the classic prank as old as doorbells themselves, found themselves on the receiving end of a response calibrated not for nuisance but for vengeance. The man has been charged. The children are reportedly safe. The story serves as a reminder that the gap between annoyed and criminal is narrower than most people think, and that some people will close that gap at sprinting speed. Story 3. A school zone camera in Tampa caught 6,000 speeding violations in its first 2 days of operation. The city is weighing a $100 fine per violation. 6,000 drivers in 2 days means that a significant portion of the driving public in that area did not notice, did not care about, or actively chose to ignore the presence of a school zone camera that was presumably visible and marked. The story is not about the camera. The camera is doing exactly what cameras do. The story is about the 6,000 people who looked at a flashing sign, a marked school zone, and the physical reality of children in the vicinity, and decided that a few seconds of time savings were worth whatever the legal consequences might be. Day 98. The connective tissue of this episode is velocity, things moving faster than the systems designed to manage them. AI development accelerating past the point where anyone is confident they can control it. A ceasefire in the Gulf collapsing at a speed that outpaced the diplomatic language used to describe it. 6,000 drivers in 2 days. A man whose patience for doorbell pranks evaporated so completely that he resorted to the kind of force you would expect from someone facing a home invasion rather than a minor inconvenience. The speed of events is not the problem. The problem is the gap between how fast things happen and how slowly the institutions meant to contain them respond. And that gap on day 98 is widening.